to spill the secrets.
This is Universal Secrets with Tiffany Mack and Kevin Hale.
It's Tuesday night. You know what that means.
Universal Secrets with Tiffany Mack and Kevin Hale.
T-Mac, how are you?
Good. I'm good. I got these sexy little glasses here that I was going to wear for Bobby tonight. We know how much he loves them.
What are those glasses? I'm good.
They're reading glasses for old folks.
Really?
Yeah.
I recently got sunglasses too.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's Clark Kent. What the heck?
Oh, but the problem is if I take them off, which I will because I'm nearsighted. And I can see you and all your glories just fine, and our guest coming up. But I don't have my cape on, so that kind of ruins.
It does
that shift.
Is that what you're going to be for Halloween this year?
I don't know. We got time.
Okay.
We've got actually, between now and Halloween, we've got another major event, and we'll discuss that later.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm ready. I'm
Family
good.
Am I good?
Yeah. It's just the same old battle. People in my family have some COVID right now and just a little bit concerned. My ex-husband just got over it and lost 17 pounds, which seems pretty significant because he's not a huge guy anyway. So glad he's better. But yeah, just dealing with the same day-to-day stuff as everybody else, trying to avoid the politics, trying to not watch the news because it gets me all stirred up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's politics, actually, even social media. As much as when it comes to social media anymore, if it's not this show or one of my other podcasts or family, I don't put anything. I don't put any shit out there that
I think that's smart.
Started.
Yeah, that's smart. You've told me to do that a few times and I just get kicked off anyway.
Yeah, more than a few, but
Well, I like
tell you
your
what
screen
to do
in the background.
What's that?
I said I like your screen in the background.
That's sweet, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just dawned on me. I've got this big TV in my room and it's like, I always have it off. So why am I not doing something with it? So
I love it. That's fantastic.
That would be us. Okay, guys. We are, what are we? September 7th. Wow.
Yeah.
Streaming live on our Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube channels. That's the video. The audio is on radio shows, courtesy of Ron, Bobby, Andy. Thanks so much, guys, for doing the audio for us. Tiffany, we have our friends, our cast of characters. They are characters too. Give a shout out to who's hanging with us.
All right. So Marco beat Andy tonight by about 7 minutes, and Bobby showed up soon after. Sherry Trimble is here, and she's got a new hashtag for you, Kevin. Listen to this. Hashtag Hails Angels. I like that one because you usually you do have a halo back there. It's just sort of sideways. It's a little skewed.
I have to admit, and that's a good tag. I've used that for many years with my kids. That's how I've described it. That and hellions.
Yes.
And when they're on my nerves, they're hellions. But when they're the glow in my eye, they're Hails Angels.
Oh, like the grandbabies, especially the new granddaughter. Yeah, kind of cute. Let's see. Charles Smar's out there. We have, oh gosh, Maria Duff. Oh, she's got another one. Let's see. Hashtag spill the secrets and oh, hail. Like that one. That one's a good one.
Mhm.
Let's see who else. I know that Erica, there's Erica. I know Queen Colleen's out there. Tracy. Hey, Tracy. Let's see. Jesse. There's Jesse Peak.
I
Um,
can't believe Tracy is with us tonight. Seriously? I can't believe.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe.
And I know that Yuffie is out there somewhere, and I wanted to give her a shout out because I think she's a little under the weather, and gonna send her
hang out
some
with this.
prayers. Yeah. So, but yeah, we've got a good show tonight. We've got a great guest coming on, and before we get to him, I would like to talk about our event that's coming up, Contact at the Compound. And I know that we sort of have beat this to death, but
Not really.
you don't
We've
think so?
not. No, we've not shoved it down their throats. I mean, we're this weekend will be 4 weeks out.
Mhm.
So if they thought we were prior to, then wait till the next 4 weeks.
Okay. So yeah, we're going to talk about that. So I have arranged some fun activities for the girls, and I'm going to arrange some fun activities for the boys. And yes, Kevin is going to
This is
have to
like-
go on a Bigfoot hike. It's going to happen, whether he wants to or not. I'm going to drag him, and I don't know if he'll be kicking and screaming, but he might be screaming and kicking by the end to go home. So we'll see how that goes. Are you ready for a Bigfoot hike?
Yeah, I mean, the city boy doesn't do anything very manual and anyway.
Are you trying to say that your hands are too manicured for a hike?
I have been told by men that they're the softest hands that they've ever felt.
I'm not sure how to take that.
Well, I mean, it's a good thing. You go up and you give them some, hey, you haven't seen you. Oh, God, man, your hands are so soft. I mean, that's corporate life. I mean, I'm doing this during the day, and that manual labor stuff, I give it to somebody else to do for.
Well, you're going to be dragged along. So we are going to definitely have some fun. I've got Sierra Neblina coming in from Colorado, and we've got Terry Lovelace coming in from. Oh yeah, I like it.
A little bit more, a little bit.
Yeah, he's coming in. I like it. Okay, and then we've got Micah Hanks and Rebecca Gerasitano, Jamin Olivencia, and my husband, Brent Sipley, who is the mystery behind the Bigfoot phenomenon, I think, personally. So,
definitely here in the Louisville area.
He could be a medium-sized Bigfoot. He's 6'4". He's a big boy.
I've heard his howl.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, he's got a big howl. He's got a big set of lungs on him, so he could probably out howl the best. And I have heard him do it a few times. And now my little Lily, who just turned 8, has decided that she has the best Bigfoot howl in the household. So I might have to record one of hers, and then we can compare them. So
there you go. But yeah,
but I'm not going to make you do it.
No, no. Oh, we'll save my howling for later. All right. We are graced by one of the cool guys. This cat, Tiffany, is I was definitely familiar with him prior to our jumping on KGRA.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember one of the wasn't the first, but we were, I want to say at the end of 2020, man, it was either in December or early January, Alan B had you and I on like a round table for his show, and Peter was on there. And I have to admit, I was a little starstruck, a little bit. I mean, he is Peter Robbins, and he's one of those guys that I gotta ask him. I remember, let's bring him on and ask him. I want to ask him, Peter, have you ever, when was the last time you raised your voice? This cat is so cool. I mean, he's so chill. Does what angers you? What annoys you? Is there anything? Does your needle ever hit the red?
Oh yeah. I'm completely intolerant of intolerance. So there's a lot of reason to scream and rant these days. I just don't always do it in public forums.
Okay.
It's probably safest so you don't get kicked off of public forums like I do. Yeah.
Well, it's
It's
not
just I get
your
feisty. I'm just
howling or words. Oh, it's your
no,
words. It's not your. Yeah.
yeah, I'm just a feisty redneck at heart. And I've gotten to the point where I'm over 40. I've been through some stuff, and I just don't feel like holding it in sometimes, because sometimes when you hold it in too long, you box it all up, you end up really flipping your shit, and then somebody gets dead. Okay? That's all I'm saying.
Dead.
Am
Okay.
I allowed to say that?
Well,
No,
hold on.
but this past year and a half has really made people bottled up and angry and hateful and really wired differently than what we have been in the past. And so, I look at all the things that we've come through as a nation and a world, I guess. I really don't know how much of the truth is getting in about other countries. That sort of confuses me and scares me a bit. But I do feel like the best thing out of this whole year and a half long shenanigan is that I got to spend more time with my kids. That's the best thing. That's it. That's what I got out of it so far. How about you, Peter?
I got to spend more time with my cat.
Cats are good. They don't usually fuss at you unless they want out, if they're outdoor kitties.
Yeah. No, I have been self-isolated since March a year ago, and I'm way out in the countryside, all the more ironic for me, having lived most of my life in the heart of New York City, which is my hometown, place I love more than any other twisted place in the world. But I also love it here. I'm in central New York State, about 5 miles from Ithaca, New York, best known, I guess, for Cornell University, great college town. 10 miles away from a terrific regional airport, and with 2 stops, I can be pretty much anywhere, but have not been much of anywhere in an awfully long time. At the same time, I love to travel, and I've visited more than 25 countries, a good number of which you wouldn't want to go into now fully armed with a small battalion. But I look forward to those adventures continuing when, the heat's turned down a little bit and we're a little bit freer to move around.
So, Peter, I know that you are an investigative writer, author, lecturer. You've done a lot of research into the UFO phenomenon, but you're also an artist. And what part of your history means the most to you at this time? Is it the UFO work and all of the research that you've done and putting that information out there for the public, or is it your work as an artist and a teacher? What part of your world is most significant right now?
I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that question. Probably in the moment, my work in the field of UFO studies, and of course, it's never been more lively and more public and more challenging than it is right now. But I guess I compartmentalize. And years ago, I read a novel by the great Kurt Vonnegut, um, Slaughterhouse-Five, came out in the early 70s. It had a big impact on me, in part because his main character, who walks through his life, but then in Vonnegut's wonderful term, gets unstuck in time. And there he is 10 years earlier or 3 years later, and knows the exact arc of his whole life from the moment he's born until he dies. I don't know that latter part, but I realized since I was a kid, I come unstuck in time all the time. Um, I can be sitting here in my study in this quiet part of farm country in New York State, and I'm back in Suffolk, England in the Randallstrom forest, or I'm in Red Square in Moscow, or I'm in Kandahar, Afghanistan, or New Delhi, or the heart of New York City on 9/11 anniversary coming up in a few days, of course, and I was not far from that tragedy when it happened. My life as an artist in New York City was terribly exciting. That had been my dream since I was a kid, and being born in the city and coming of age in a village about 30 miles east, I had the best of both worlds. I was a block away from a state park, and yet 40 minutes I could be in Midtown Manhattan. Um, I got to the point where I was really starting to follow that dream was becoming a reality. I was working in galleries downtown. I knew famous artists, people like Roy Lichtenstein or Andy Warhol. I had apprenticed for one of the last great abstract expressionists, a wonderful painter named Adolf Gottlieb. And that part of my life is always alive, internally, that I return to at times or reactivated when I visit a museum or gallery. But I also spent years in off-Broadway theater management and worked for years with Academy Award winners and Tony Award winners, and got to see some of the greatest theater imaginable, and worked as an assistant director. And again, for me, that reality of traveling, of just getting out there in the world, the greatest byproduct of which, and I'll say the same thing for UFO studies, is the extraordinary people that I've gotten to meet, spend time with, in many cases, develop lifelong friendships with, that I would have never been in that proximity otherwise. So yeah, the long answer to your short question is, at this point in my life, the most active day-to-day part of it is that dialogue, discussion, soap opera, battle that we call ufology.
The reason I ask is because I feel that we have found a lot of experiencers that are artists. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your maybe research and contacts and any kind of significant artist that you can think of that has had major UFO experiences.
Yes, several come right to mind, and I can't tell you who any of them are because I carry a vow of confidence to a great degree. I will say that a number of them are world famous, and I don't just mean in the visual arts. I mean in the performing arts, in the world of film directing, musicians. I would like to tell you who they are, but I
Are
can't.
you can't tell us because
Because it's not anybody's business except theirs, and the fact that they confided it to me.
okay, it
In
was
great part,
confided. Just
yeah,
making sure.
and
Okay.
several of them are gone now, but still
Mhm.
those confidences remain in effect, because during their lifetime, one of their biggest concerns was being tagged as, the UFO pop singer, or the UFO painter, or the UFO film director, and major players. People in the acting arts who have had major roles in films and on Broadway.
Mhm.
I would say, though, that for me, people who have experiences, who are abductees, and for any of your listeners who or viewers who, I wonder if this abduction phenomena is real. The answer to that is yes, it is. It
There we
happens
go.
to real people all over the world, and it's as real as the chairs that the three of us are sitting in right now. But of course, if it's never happened to you, even if you're intellectually curious and open-minded, well, it could be a number of psychological aberrations and sleep paralysis and all this stuff, and desire to be well known. All that
It
stuff exists, and it's real. And for me, having entered the work like a car crash more than 40 years ago, with my sister Helen telling me about abduction related memories before there really was a field of abduction studies per se, or the term gray had entered the lexicon, or the first significant books on abduction studies started to come out in the 80s. These are the people that come first. And I'm an investigative writer. I am not an experiencer per se. I've had some unusual experiences in my life, but we're talking hardcore. And right now, the dialogue, and it's fascinating, and it's now engaging more and more people outside of the world of UFO studies. On the big phone-in or whatever the acronym is, this weekend, I listened to a panel discussion with Louis Elizondo, incredibly articulate, I think very dedicated, scholarly, committed guy. And one of the participants in a panel discussion, in fact, Tiffany, it was N.K. Cranda, who was part of our panel discussion, asked him specifically about where, experiences fit into this matrix in this dialogue, because without them, literally, we'd be talking to each other completely about this phenomenon. And he got it. He got it. And one of the reasons I have gone into the next state of public communications in my work as a person in this field, as a broadcaster, is to keep coming back to that subject. Although, of course, my program ranges to different guests, to different topics. In fact, on Monday, I'm going to be having several ministers, a rabbi, several lay Catholic scholars to discuss UFOs and religion, the implications of disclosure on people of faith, UFOs in the Bible, these things, and then go on to the next subject the next week, which will also be about abductions. But last night I had on Bryce Zabel, who is one of the greatest Hollywood people in terms of UFO prominence in making serious and good media. He is the director, producer, writer of that iconic, for me, cult level television show years ago on NBC, only lasted 2 seasons, called Dark Skies, which I found incredibly entertaining, like the unified conspiracy theory, and just a great mix of fact and fiction, and not purporting to be anything but. But experiencers and abductees, their voices, I think, are more and more important as this dialogue elevates into the general population more and more.
Right. Now, one last question in regards to your friends who are artists and stuff that confided in you.
Doesn't have to be a last question.
No, but no, I don't want to beat it down, go too far with it. But even, I don't. You mentioned some are no longer with us, and much respect and all that. But the ones that are here, the ones that maybe confided in you years ago, I don't know if you've talked to them since, but since 2017, December 2017 to now, when the whole UFO UAP thing is just it's the sexy talk. I mean, it is the talk. Does that allow them, or have allowed any of them to maybe, okay, maybe I don't mind talking about this. Yeah, just throwing it out.
I have spoken to several people in that category, and the consensus from that group is it's really good that this is more and more entering into the public dialogue. And I have tremendous admiration for experiencers and abductees who are public people, or who are making themselves into public people now, in great part because what I would call the ridicule factor is dissipating at an accelerating rate of speed. You can still have people make fun of you, or call your name behind your back, but it's not so deeply enculturated as it was, and more people care less and less what other people think about what they think about the subject. And that's a very healthy trend. It would not surprise me if over the next few years, a number of them do make themselves public on this subject. Years ago, Kathy Marden, a good friend, one of the most respected people in the field, certainly since Bud Hopkins' passing 10 years ago, one of the most authoritative voices in the world of abduction studies, entered the field because she grew up with the subject in that Betty and Barney Hill, the first major case to receive worldwide attention and one of the best documented abduction events in history, were her aunt and uncle. Betty was her mother's sister. What Kathy didn't talk about was the fact that such things had happened to her and to her mother from the time she was young, and did not want to deal with the ridicule. And when she became better known in the work, did not want to deal with anybody looking at her cross-eyed essentially and saying, oh, well, now you're saying it because, you want people to think that this happened to you too. And it got to the point where internally she had just had it. And I guess it was about half a dozen years ago, during a presentation she was doing at a now non-active conference, which I hope somebody is able to bring back again, the Experiencers Speak conference in Portland, Maine, that she just let people know and talked about why she hadn't talked about it, and got a very well-deserved standing ovation. And I don't think anybody's really looked at her cross-eyed about this that I'm aware of ever since. If they don't, they've got a lot of us to do. If they do, they have a lot of us to deal with in terms of inappropriate, responses.
Yeah, it's it's something that I really haven't dealt with a whole lot yet, and I hope I don't have to. But it's very therapeutic to be able to release this information and not have to hold it in all the time and live this sort of double life and
Yes.
partial lie, because it's one of the things that is so ingrained in your everyday. And you do have to deal with kids, pets, husbands, wives, families, in-laws, all of these other situations that are all around us every day, employers, your company, the people at work. When you come forward with information like this, it's out there on the internet. Anybody can find it.
Yeah.
So if you're not ready to do that, probably not a good idea. Don't even make a peep, because if you can't handle the heat, it's probably not safe.
Don't
So
say get out of the kitchen.
You
You're
know,
gonna say that too?
it's probably not the safest thing for you. I don't think that it is something that everyone should say, because the circumstances around every family life and every person is different. It's not a one size fit all situation. Just because I came out and said this has happened, and it hasn't affected my life. Thankfully, I have supportive people around me. Not everybody has that.
No.
And, if I didn't have a supportive spouse, a supportive mom, a supportive family, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would still hold it in. I would still keep it quiet, and I would still be living with trauma is what it would be. And that's what it felt like, and being able to say it and let it out is therapeutic.
Yeah.
Talk therapy, people. Talk therapy. It works.
Yeah.
Please.
Let me add real quick too, and the fact that, to your point, the ridicule, the stigma, that feedback, that negative feedback, but then you get social media, which, I mean, if you let it can beat you down.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of trolling, and the truth is, there's a lot of keyboard cowboys and cowgirls out there that just like to think they're,
Well said. Jumping back a moment, Jesse Peak, thank you for reminding me that dialogue with Louis Elizondo came up on the big phone home too. Also, you bring up a very important point, Tiffany. Keeping a secret, depending on the nature its gravitas, its hold on you can be incredibly damaging. Everybody has secrets. Most of them are more in the mundane, manageable realm, but some of them are big and some of them suck the life out of you. And it's one of the things for me, when you enter any discipline that is tangled up with other disciplines, you become something of a master of going off on tangents. You can't be a serious student of the subject of UFOs without wanting and needing to learn a certain amount about science in general, physics in specific, human psychology, how physiological shock functions. And you read what you need to, and you come back into the matrix of what you're doing to help you express what you need to better. And I learned that in part by working as a well-trained crisis intervention volunteer for 8 years with an international organization called Samaritans International. I worked out of their New York office 4 years as a phone volunteer and another 4 years as a phone volunteer and shift supervisor on what amounted to the busiest suicide hotline in America. I had to take a number of breaks. Usually the burnout rate was about 1 year. And it was very valuable to me, but at a certain point I had to get out. But I learned many valuable lessons. Again, when my sister first talked to me about her memories, we were particularly close. My sister passed in January of 2000, but we were not just siblings. We were best friends. When we were older, we were roommates at different points in our life. We dated each other's friends. We'd edit each other's work. We'd work with each other on creative projects, stay up all night watching bad movies, smoking weed. I knew that she was telling the truth, even though this was completely an area that I had no idea about. But she made herself a public person not long after. And in a way, with the support, even if it wasn't screamed from the rooftops, of our parents, who were open-minded about the childhood sighting we had had and its implications for her. And she went on to become a very well-recognized and very popular presence in the music business. Was part of that whole first wave of punk performers coming out of CBGBs and other clubs in Lower Manhattan, gold and platinum record award-winning recording artist and lyricist for groups like the Blue Oyster Cult, and incredible stage performer. And because of her, I, without realizing it, was pulled in at the very beginning to going to these shows and seeing these groups who nobody had ever heard of. And in this club that the fire regs kept it at 175 people, and it was usually packed. But, watching the first performances of the Ramones and Iggy and the Talking Heads and Blondie, having no idea that you were there at a moment, in musical history. And she'd often go on tangents in music business press interviews just about her abduction experiences. And if you had a problem with it, it was your fucking problem, not hers.
Really? Good for her.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. That's one way to go. Just be strong and be committed.
Yeah, exactly.
You said you lost your sister in January 2000?
I did.
I have the same story. Me too. I lost my younger sister in January 2000 as well. So feel you. Yeah.
Well, right there with you, brother.
It doesn't seem like it was that long ago, because now we're looking at the
21 years,
20. We're looking at the 20th year anniversary
11.
coming up of 9/11, and honestly, it may have been half my lifetime ago, but that doesn't seem very long ago because of how traumatic it was for the world,
That's right.
for us, and how many people were lost in such a short period of time, so traumatically. And it's sort of coming back. I don't want to get into politics too much, but I'm feeling that anxiety again with what's happening in Afghanistan, and it does take you back. So all of the good things take you back to those moments and the bad things too, unfortunately.
It's human nature.
Yeah.
It's I already realize that I'm going to be setting aside a good part of Saturday just for reflection. Maybe make a post or two in social media, and then keep to myself. I took
Mhm.
it very personally.
Yeah.
This is my hometown, and I'm old enough not just to remember when they broke ground for the Trade Center, but as a kid, I remember that neighborhood
Mhm.
before it was all 16 acres or so was rezoned,
Yeah.
then flattened, and they started the work. And it was like different parts of mercantile New York, where there are concentrations of certain areas of business. Going back to the 1920s, that neighborhood was called Radio Row because it was the largest concentration of what came to be called high fidelity and stereo and radio stores in New York. And it's where you would go, back in the analog days to get the best deal on a Fisher preamp or, that kind of thing. Also, as a dedicated New York City walking tour guide, I can't even tell you how many times I was in and out of the trade centers, or all the facts in my head that I used to walk around with, or the times that I was on the roof of the North Tower with tourists. And it's all still right there for me. And politics be
Mhm.
damned.
Mhm.
Whatever happened, whatever the causes were, it was just the worst day of many of our lives for me, uh, for so many people who actually lost friends and loved ones there. And at the same time, in the days and weeks and months following, I never felt prouder in my
Mhm.
life to be a New Yorker, and I'm always proud to be a New Yorker.
Mhm.
The camaraderie, the way that people from all over the world descended on our city with the best of intentions. All of a sudden, there were police officers on different corners from different states and then from different countries. Same thing for firefighters. You can't walk by a firehouse in New York without seeing their particular honorarium to the brother and sister firefighters that they lost on that day. Um, Unfortunately, it did not serve to bring us all fully back together, to put it mildly. And, we could go off on a tangent from there. But Saturday will be a day of rest, reflection, remembrance for many of us.
Mhm.
I have to add this. I remember 9/11, 2001, very clear. Correct me if I'm wrong, Peter. It's a Tuesday, right? Does that sound right? Tuesday morning. I, I'm back in the day. I'm doing IT work with the huge pizza chain here in town, Tiffany, and remember just getting in. I got in shortly before 9, and everyone was in a conference room. TV's on. I'm like, WTF, what's going on? And I walk in time to see the second plane, and I was clearly devastated. I mean, everybody's crying. No one's understanding it, getting it. We wound up, work got shut down, and we went home. And the one thing I remember from that evening, later in the day, um, my son, who just had a birthday, he's 24. He just turned 24. Tell my age. He was 4 at the time, and uh, back in the married days, he were having dinner, and he starts sobbing on his mom on her lap, and he was scared. He was scared that something was going to happen to his family, and that's when I really got angry. That, and it's, I mean, a lot of still mixed emotions about that day, and I'm feeling you, Tiffany. There is that little vibe because there's so much uncertainty on what's going on right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And for whatever side of the fence you're on, I mean, we're still in this together. I mean, we just got to be better people these days. So,
Yeah. Um, it's so easy to be contentious, especially online, to get in people's faces. It's so easy to hide behind fake identities or pump up your own. Part of the way I sign off on my show is stay safe, uh, um, stand up for what you believe in, and be kind to each other whenever possible. And I remember that morning, it was the last straight regulation issue office job I ever had in my life, a multimedia company in Midtown, um, which dealt in manga and anime. But the CEOs left at Eastgate. They loved my pioneering work. They set me up with my own company in the middle of this Japanese cultural madness. And I ran a very, I think, a pioneering website for 5.5 years called UFOcity.com. And 5 days a week, we posted information from all over the world, broke stories. I had a wonderful cadre of writers and contributors. Paid no one, but I made sure they had very nice business cards with special correspondent and raised print. Oh, yes.
Can I get one of those, Kevin?
There's nothing about like that raised print, just to feel it.
Oh, yeah.
We'll talk later.
I've never owned one of those.
I got into work early that day, and I guess about 8:45, I forget the exact time, somebody came to the end of my corridor. One of my colleagues, I couldn't tell you if it was what my life depended on, said a plane just crashed into the trade center, or one of the trade centers. And my first thought was flashing back to an event in the 1940s when a military aircraft, at a time when the flight laws over Manhattan were very different than they are now, in a fog, crashed into the Empire State Building and, like almost a cartoon, stuck in. It was a Sunday, and the loss of life was minimal. I think 7 people,
I
but
don't
it was
remember
some
ever
days.
hearing of this.
Yeah, you can Google it.
It was in the 40s, did you say?
Yeah, I think 47
Really?
or so, give or take, post-war.
Okay.
And again, a military aircraft. And it was some days before they were able to, get it all clear. But my first thought was, what the hell? It's the most beautiful day of the year. I mean, that was one thing that made everything more surreal for us New Yorkers. The weather was
It
exquisite.
was
It
beautiful.
was breathtaking. And
Clear,
the
crystal
thought of
clear.
it, in my mind, although a lot of people said I knew when it happened, I sensed, not me. I thought it was, a small aircraft, and it hit the trade center and kind of filed it. And then, of course, I heard a scream in the other room later in the morning. And it was an office with about 45 people working in the company. And everybody had monitors. I mean, we all worked at computers, but we also were cutting trailers and working on different animations and that kind of thing. But there's only one television, and we all gathered around it. And our boss, very tough, smart guy, said it's obvious that our city is under attack. I'm going to let everybody go, but I don't want anybody to leave here who is off the island, who doesn't have somebody they can stay with on the island if bridges and tunnels are cut.
That
And
was very smart.
it was. And
Wow.
so we all had
That's
backup
really
plans there. Yep. I lived at the time on West 88th Street, just off of Central Park, about a mile and a half away. And I would have been happy to have people stay with me. And then the building management people put out word that they were evacuating the building, in part because directly across the street, out the window, was the world headquarters of Newsweek. And our company name, Central Park Media, had the word media in it, so there was a concern.
Mm-hmm.
And I went home, and I was in my lovely little apartment, listening to the news with this gorgeous day outside and the madness of war, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happened to the rest of the world, but our city, somebody was at war with it. And that's all we knew that day.
Mm-hmm.
And at a certain point late in the afternoon, it hit me how not only hurting I was, but how angry I was. Again, as a tour guide, I knew that in the course of an average day, 250,000 people could come and go from the trade centers. That's Hartford, Connecticut.
Wow.
And had the planes hit an hour later, it would have been 20 or 30 or 40,000 dead, not 3,000.
Yeah.
But in my mind, we had no stats, of course. But late in that afternoon, I thought, fuck this. I'm not going to be a prisoner in my own apartment. And I walked down to Times Square Took about an hour. Again, we weren't smelling any of the smoke. We weren't having any of the debris. The wind was due east, so it was blowing over to Brooklyn, not uptown. And the streets were almost empty. It was the emptiest I've ever seen Times Square, but every electrical display was all about what was going on. And, I passed like one cafe where few people were sitting outside making a show of trying to have what we'll laughingly call a normal night in the world, and went to work the next day. But I was obsessed with getting down there. Again, I had a job like you guys, and it wasn't until Saturday morning, and I had packed up my Nikon full of film, had my whole kit ready. The subway was still working in my part of the city, set my alarm for 5 o'clock. And at Canal Street, basically there was a cordon. They kept moving it up for the few days previous, and it was National Guard. You couldn't get down there. And I'm a solid citizen. I'm not into breaking the law, but I just kept going through that cordon wherever I didn't see military people. And they kept finding me and escorting me out very politely. I got fairly close, and ultimately at Greenwich Street, I had like a gunshot sight down a mile where you could see the debris pile, and with a telephoto, you could see the fire hoses. This is several days later, but of course that was like a tire fire. It burned for months. Anyway, I could go on, but why bother? The memorial that they have created there, it took 10 years of talking to families, talking to police, talking to the fire department, listening to what the world was saying. And for most of us, the one thing that couldn't happen was rebuilding on those two sites. They were cemeteries. And the memorial they created was extremely tasteful. And the museum that exists, if you ever visit Manhattan or you've been there, it's a modern metal structure that you think that's the museum. And you go in it, and you realize you're just in a huge receiving area. The museum is below ground. It's part of the foundation. It's several 100,000 square feet. You are there where it all happened. And I encourage any, I was going to say American, but any human being to visit and get a sense of the sweep of the madness and destruction. And even saying that, I think 3,000 dead, a huge event in American and world history. And, think about parts of the world where people, and again, up until recently with our withdrawal from Afghanistan, however poorly managed it was, the carnage is reducing. Iraq as well. But that we don't think about those people in the same breath that we think about ourselves and our fellow Americans. I guess that's partly human nature, partly the way that we are programmed, partly
it's the out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, exactly. We're all kind of tribal in that sense, although it's what the driving force was, that everybody from Alexander the Great, the English, the French, the Russians, and then us, nobody should have bothered invading Afghanistan. I visited Afghanistan twice in very peaceful times when it was a kingdom with a constitutional monarchy and very tolerant. And it was...
I'm guessing that was before the 70s?
It was the early 70s.
Early
70s.
Okay.
And I had one of the great learning experiences of my life. And when I think now of the places I roamed around by myself, that they wouldn't send in 1,000 American troops armed to the teeth for all the right reasons, it almost seems like a dream, except that in no way was it a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Without getting too political, and this will be my last, maybe our last 9/11 question or Q&A thing. Are we that vulnerable right now?
Say it again.
Are we that vulnerable right now? I mean, in 2000, we were just, you think about how caught off guard. Well,
we weren't vulnerable then, Kevin.
Say
We weren't vulnerable then. That wasn't necessarily vulnerability, I don't think.
It strikes me as so ironic sometimes remembering when Osama bin Laden was alive and he was, our number one certain villain in terms of America and the Western world, that something he said got by a lot of people, which was his aim, was to have the West basically go bankrupt,
Mhm.
with its military industrial complex, putting trillions of dollars into the war. In a way, he was absolutely right. We, the people of the United States, we are all on the credit card right now. There is a clock up in Manhattan, a few blocks from Times Square. It's a big electrical display. It's been there 20 years at least, and it's the national debt.
Yeah.
And for
Mhm.
many years, it was simply your family or your part of the national debt is, and it was just, $18,000, unbelievable figures. And now, we're all owned by the international bankers on a certain level.
Mhm.
We play at, we are a free country. Well, not financially. It's, we've gone so deep into the pockets of world financiers, one wonders how it's ever going to resolve. There is this play at, being independent countries, republics, democracies, dictatorships, kingdoms, but we're just chess pieces being moved around, all of us doing our best to pay down the interest, the VIG in the borrowing that has been
That's a
done
good point.
and playing into the hands of those people that have always been in power.
No, good point. Now, Tiffany, when I said vulnerable, I probably meant the word really I was looking for is relaxed. We were so
Oh, yeah.
freaking naive.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
that's a better
yeah.
way
There
to
you
put
go.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but go ahead.
Yeah, I feel you with that. Let's use this as a segue into the idea of exopolitics. You know, I'm still learning a lot about the potential of having relations with other entities and other civilizations. What are your thoughts about the promotion of exopolitics and our being um, welcomed into maybe a space-aged community that is well beyond ours?
Boy, that's a great question. And one that I honestly don't give a tremendous amount of personal thought to. I have, for the last few decades, my passionate interest in terms of the world of UFO studies as a springboard has not been where it started. Who are they? Where do they come from? Why are they here? What do their technology run on? Um, what do they want from us? What do they have for breakfast? As
My
opposed
God,
to
those are all good questions, though.
what do they have for breakfast? It's
A
been
number
more.
4
Number
with
4.
yeah.
It's been more the question of how does this impact on my fellow human beings, and what is the potential for this subject getting to a point where it reaches what I will call a critical mass in the population. A proportion of the population certainly doesn't have to be a majority, but that is big enough to affect social thinking. A lesson that I learned in working in the theater. For a number of years, the repertory company that I worked as a manager for, we leased a theater in the West 50s, small, 210 seats max, state of the art. And we were dedicated to reviving great dramas of the past that had social relevance. They could be tragedies, they could be comedies, or straight dramas. And I remember at one point we were doing a revival of a play that hadn't been redone since it opened in Broadway in 1919 or around that time. It was a comedy by a then famous writer named Booth Talkington about a returning World War I veteran who falls in love with a woman who comes from a wealthy New Jersey family. Her father, they are what we was referred to as lace curtain Irish. They were gentry Irish. They were wealthy. They had made it in America. They owned a furniture factory, and it was filled with all kinds of, humor about returning veterans and about class structure and all that. It was an antique, but it was hysterically funny. And when the house was full, I remember early on patrolling the lobby and hearing a noise coming from the theater, opening the door, because I wasn't familiar with the noise. It was the noise of about 210 people laughing so hard they were losing their breath. Now, when that same play was running with the same actors, doing the same quality performance on, say, a rainy Thursday night, when it was cold out and miserable and there were 59 people in the theater, it didn't happen. Laughter needs a certain camaraderie. You can't completely let go in a social circumstance, I observed, unless you're surrounded by people that you're sharing the experience with. For me, what's important here, and I'm not dodging your question, I'll get to it, but what's important to me is imagine a time when enough people in the world, and it may happen through them initiating some kind of event that's undeniable, or a very credible WikiLeaks type information dump, or equivalent of a Daniel Ellsberg Pentagon Papers kind of information dump, that enough people in the world across the board, from people with modest education to movers and shakers and academics and politicos, say, my God, this is real. It's happening. The little bit that they let out in June and all of the stuff that I've heard about is nothing compared to what I'm really seeing right now. The danger for the forces that be, for, again, those who move the chess pieces, those who head governments, is that, God forbid, human beings here start to think of themselves not first as Americans or Indians or Brazilians or Russians or Israelis or Yemenis or whatever. They start thinking of themselves first as human beings, even before being a man or woman, even before being rich or poor, even before whatever your religion is. That could have the effect of shaking the foundations of this brilliant construct called nationalism, where our country is the best and we love our country, and our country has borders. And if the people on that side of the border cross on this side of the border, we're going to kill your ass. Why? Because you crossed that line, and that's our line, and you're on our side of the line now. It's Neanderthal, but it works, and there are reasons for it. And of course, I'm generalizing, exaggerating here a bit, but it was Stanton T. Friedman, one of the greatest people in the world of ufology ever, who we lost a few years ago, who first posed that question in a way that made sense to me. Also, the fact that with all the talk about back engineering and how much of our technology now may be the result of that phenomena, or, as Bud Hopkins used to argue, at our best, we human beings are literally capable of anything if we work together, if we put our minds to it, if we have the proper funding. Could we have gotten from there to here on our own? For me, the internet is like the Godhead. How did that happen? I mean, how is it possible, like 1,000 chimpanzees typing in 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years, and one of them produces the script for Hamlet? How did it happen that so many programmers working away in a relatively short period of time have answered every question imaginable? Every once in a while, maybe some of you do it too. I think of the most obscure question. What was the name of Beethoven's younger sister? And I just pop it in. Of course, it always has the answer. Could we have gotten from there, listening to tube radios, to where we are now with, the beginning of space tourism on our own?
In a blink, Peter. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Since I guess the boom was in the 40s or whatever. You can argue 47, Roswell, blah, blah, blah. But in less than 100 years, where we're at with technology, the artificial intelligence that we carry in our pockets, our phone, that you literally can talk to, and it will right away give you an answer.
Well,
Exactly.
I know that both of you all will be able to say how old you were when you had your first desktop computer at home, your first PC in your home. I remember going to my dad's office, and he was in the tobacco industry, and he had an entire massive monster, like I think an entire floor that was just computers. And they had that air conditioning. It was loud, and it's like, holy crap, what the hell's going on in here? It's like 5 bazillion bees, you know, it's like, and you can just feel it. Now we don't have that problem. Now we've, like Kevin said, it's in the back pocket all the time, and it's probably more powerful than those computers ever wanted to imagine being.
Smartwatch.
I saw on a show the other day that a crystal, help me, I mean, one of you may know
A quartz,
both,
a piece of
a quartz, literally the size, I mean, seriously, about 1 by 1 inch, you know, whatever, could store all the amount of storage it can hold. I mean, it just blew me away. That, I mean, we're talking, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, you can actually, where we're at technology again, something, you know, something kickstarted us. Something.
Kevin,
Yes.
can you imagine how much data a crystal skull could have?
Well, you make me laugh because I remember years ago, before I became interested in UFOs, I was interested in other matters, esoteric, ancient mysteries, ancient civilizations,
Love it.
telekinesis, all of,
good
you know,
stuff.
these mysteries.
Starting to
And
turn us on, Peter.
I remember, I think it was Morning of the Magicians, one of the first books that I read that discussed, it kind of unified so many of these mysteries, and it talked at one point about quartz crystals and their potential for information storage. I sometimes laugh and think of myself as a analog person in a digital world. I grew up severely dyslexic, and I didn't master reading until I was about 8 or so. But after that, you know, good luck holding me back. I was consciously building a library by the time I was 11 years old. I mean, what you see behind you is a portion of the books in my house. I love books for what they are. I love reading. And I think now, you know, on a standard zip drive, half of that information could be right here, or on an e-reader of whatever type that you use. It's, for me, terribly unromantic thinking of future manuscripts for great pieces of literature as just this digitized little bit of information, rather than, you know, the script with lots of ink crossed out and things rewritten and all that.
The flipping of the pages and the smell of the pages and the feel of the hardback. I love a good hardback book. You know, it's just, I like the weight of it. I'm comfortable with that. And it's just so soothing to hold a book. And the idea of being able to use a Kindle is great for on the go, or you know,
absolutely
or an
terrific.
iPad on the go. It's fantastic. But if you want to really cuddle up and snuggle, get a good book.
Tiffany, could you imagine? I say this with all due respect. We're friends. We can like go sit on the bed with the covers, pillows, and Peter can read us a story.
Yes, that would be great. My husband might have a little concern, but
he could sit with us. He'd lay with us.
And you know,
we got plenty of room for it.
Being somewhat less than 6'4" and not the most aggressive person, I like to keep on the right side.
Peter's a lover, not a fighter.
Like your husband.
Well, my husband's a big teddy bear for the most part.
You
just
bring
don't
up a very
piss him
important
off.
point. The more, you know, one of the great tragedies of our time, I think, is that more and more people read less and less for pleasure, if they read at all.
Yes.
And as far as handwriting goes, you know, it's a non-entity for most people. And I think that's a shame. More to the point, though, most of us think about reading out loud as something that you do for children, if you have children. But reading out loud to other, what we'll call grown-ups, can be a wonderful activity as well.
Peter, we will set you up with a assigned time with Kevin. You can cuddle up with a blanket on your own, own couches, and then you can read to him. He probably hasn't heard a book in a very long time because I know he doesn't read them.
Well,
Ah,
it
that's
is
your department.
gratifying, though, to see that in the microcosm of the people that are coming up through the ranks in the world of UFO studies, there is more and more this palpable joy in people building libraries and in posting online. I just found this edition of this book from 1954 in this condition. Wow, that's so cool. We all have our areas of passion in terms of the world of things, the same way that when vinyl gave way to video cassettes
Yeah.
and ultimately DVDs and then downloads, that now, because there is a very special audio aspect to vinyl, and it's wonderful seeing people
Hmm.
buying turntables and
Hmm.
buying records. I think it's great. I would encourage anybody, I mean, it doesn't just deal with UFOs, but the idea of building a library
Yeah.
of books. For a lot of us, and I know, having lived in New York City most of my life, space is a premium. And you've only got so much room, but if you
Good
have
point.
the luxury for a couple of bookcases to start to build or add to what you have on a regular basis and take pride in it. Could go off on a total book tangent for the whole second hour, but I'm going to repress that desire. You did ask me a question that I haven't answered yet, which has to do with, and why don't you restate it, relative to disclosure and exopolitics. And
I think I was just wondering what your thoughts were. Are we going to have to, I know that President Trump had declared that he was building the Space Force. Are we going to have a whole group of people who are going to help initiate contact on a human scale so that we can all get sort of indoctrinated into this next step? I do feel like there is another step coming. And I think that anybody who has been following the news when it comes to UFOs and that stuff, we're getting to that human level. The next step is having contact that's open and trying to figure out our place and where we're going and where we're headed when it comes to our own civilization if we don't get wiped out soon. I'm not saying that we are, just saying I'd like to be able to spread our seed and go out a little bit further.
yeah. you know maybe part of it is being a writer and loving language, but I pay particular attention to how words are deployed, especially on a political level, intelligence level, military level. And I remember that very uneasy feeling I felt when it was announced that we were going to be adding a new service branch called the Space Force. That was a deliberate choice of words. I remember following 9/11, how infuriated I was that George Bush the younger chose to address the conflict that they were about to get engaged in as a war on terror, which made me crazy. A war on terror is a war on an abstract concept. You can't win it. A war on terrorism is a reality. And that word was completely ignored. And I think that was intentional on a certain level, for reasons we could, again, spend the rest of the show
Wow.
on.
Yeah.
But I did not feel good about that term Space Force. First of
Mhm.
all, it's the military. We have known since 1947 we can't do shit as far as affecting them on a military level. One need only read through the reams, the thousands of pages of fully authentic, properly declassified military intelligence documentation going back to 1947 or 48 to realize the schizophrenic nature of the way we've been addressing the subject. It's nothing, it's swamp gas, it's mass hallucinations, it's war jitters, nothing to see here, folks, move on. When man, and I say man as opposed to mankind, because I don't think it was a woman who came up with this basic idea. It's all about aggression and counter-aggression. And at least we can take the pose that we're still guys and tough guys and, wonderfully fantasized in films like Independence Day. We're going to kick ET's ass. Oh, yeah? Really?
How are you going to do that?
Right.
Exactly.
So,
before they zip out, or
I also had a slightly uneasy feeling that quickly degenerated into comedy when I saw that one of the uniforms put forward for the Space Force was desert camouflage. And let's think that one through in space. But I think it's more a show on that
maybe they
level.
just had some extra material from the
exactly,
last,
exactly.
Desert Storm. They just had a little bit extra.
Yeah, we got this stuff, and maybe we can make space look more deserty out there at some point.
You could try. I'm sure.
I think, as in most cases where human conflicts have been well resolved on a long term, it's been done diplomatically, often following conflict. I sometimes think with pride that the country we were in 1947, with all of its endemic problems and social problems and, not talked about as much race problems and whatever problems you want to add to it, we had done something incredibly noble. We had defeated fascism in Europe and in the Pacific in terms of the Nazi Empire and the Japanese Empire. And what were we doing that nobody had ever done in history, really? We were pouring billions into both countries to help them rebuild themselves into functioning democracies. Now, let's take a look at it now. How many countries have Japan and Germany attacked since 1945? They have done an extraordinary job of not just rebuilding, but in many respects, standing as a beacon of what you can do with a change of mindset, with help, a great deal of help from your former enemy. I wish we were more like that now. Of course, we're not in any position to be like it. Remember, when I was a kid, up until we got into Vietnam, this country's budget was in the black. That's a concept most people can't even wrap their heads around right now. We were in debt to no one. We covered our expenses and then some. I think diplomacy and working, even though it would be a new kind of diplomatic corps, is where we should at least be putting a lot of our discussion. Again, President Eisenhower tried to warn us, and too late, as he left office, beware of the military-industrial complex. We'll talk about something that's come back to roost. They own us. The amount of money that they have made just in the past 20 years, forget about Vietnam. They are probably the wealthiest corporate entity on the planet if you could actually, see the figures, which of course we can't, and so many Black Project related things. But we think in terms of weapons and weaponry and defensive measures rather than, there's only two forces in the world. You can call them love and hate, right and wrong, good or bad, but they come down to love and fear. You either have to trust, take a deep breath and move forward. And, it's a big risk, or just keep being aggressive and encouraging aggression and encouraging your citizens to see people who have nothing to do with you, don't relate to you, or as different from you as you can be, as the other. You need an enemy. When, with the fall of the Soviet Union, our country went into something of an identity crisis. We had this terrific unspoken agreement since 1947 and the advent of the Cold War, which superimposed itself. And I think this was a very legitimate, real historical coincidence and not some conspiracy machination, that the summer of 1947, the official beginning of the Cold War, was most certainly the beginning of our modern age of UFOs. And for 45 years, we were able to play that. In fact, as we now know, the UFO question superimposed itself well on that. that there were certain situations between the Americans and Russians where you could say, oh, look, a UFO, when it was really a weapons test and you wanted to, not set off a war, or a UFO, a truly legitimate, truly anomalous UFO situation could be tagged as an aggressive act. And we need to pump more money into our budget to watch out for those Ruskies, or they, the equivalent on their side. I think a lot of it has to do with studying how, well, we're very poor at learning lessons from history. Humanity in general to a degree, but in America, we're particularly bad at it. And that phrase, it's a quote attributed to several different people. Those who do not understand history are condemned to repeat it. It shocks me as an American of Russian Jewish primarily background, the percentage of Americans that don't believe the Holocaust happened or that the Jews deserved it.
I don't understand that. That doesn't even register with me at all. I don't get it.
It's willful ignorance is what it is. It's choosing to stay unaware of factual material because it flies in the face of whatever your pet belief or fear or prejudice is. Again, Stanton Friedman, who is so wonderful with phraseology, don't bother me with the truth. My mind's already made up.
Well, yeah, and I guess that just sort of allows for the millions of people who have died at the cause of genocide, and it just is negligence. Like, okay, never mind, that didn't really happen. Here, I've got a question from Charles Smar for you. If the Space Force is between them and us, my only question is, which way are the weapons pointed? Where would they be pointed?
Well, Charles, a good question. And hi, Charles. Number one, I don't necessarily believe that the Space Force is between us and them. Let's call it the entire American military as it stands right now. The technology that we face, depending on your point of view, your belief hole, your beliefs, your threshold for accepting some fairly weighty concepts, are they 50,000 years ahead of us, or are they 5 million years ahead of us? Weaponry, there is no case that we can bring into court, so to say. There may have been situations where an American missile actually hit a UFO. Show me the particulars of the case.
Have you actually heard of one that has happened to?
No, but I've heard, it's part of the myth, rumor, lore of the world of UFO studies. Mm-hmm. And part of the frustration of trying to do, for me, nuts and bolts work. I don't have any sources deep within the American intelligence community. Alien leaders don't channel me messages. I'm a fairly plodding researcher, and my mentors, one, a retired Hungarian army staff officer, the other, a tough, no-nonsense New York City police detective, and the other, a painter who became the best self-trained investigator I ever met, all encouraged me to triangulate evidence. But, the kind of evidence you could bring into court. Physical evidence, photographic evidence, combined with witness testimony, combined with a history of certain aspects of behavior in a certain area, et cetera, and so forth. However, UFOs and consciousness is a perfectly legitimate field of research and study, and one that's receiving more and more attention now, rightly. We need all views kind of coming in. And right now, what I'm seeing is we have two basic schools of thought coming at each other. One is whatever's going on with them. And that's complexified by what I feel is a fact, although I can't prove it, that we are dealing with more than one group of them. It's naive. I think it's as naive to think that there is one other intelligence in the entire cosmos that is interacting with us, as opposed to many. I think it's unlikely that there's one as there's none. Mm-hmm. And of those groups, they may have very different relationships, intentions for, feelings about the dominant creature on this little speck of planet that's zooming around the world, on our orbit, called the Earth, that they may have pre-existing relationships with this planet. Some of them, in fact, may be here all the time with us, but one dimension away, and seated next to the three of us in our various rooms, enjoying this conversation very much. I think it's ironic that the extraterrestrial hypothesis has ultimately emerged as the most conservative. You know, right now, there's a great popularity in looking at all things Jacques Vallée, and rightly so. Interdimensional aspects. What I know after more than 40 years in this work, that I absolutely know, is how little I know. And people say, well, you're an expert. And occasionally I'm brought onto a show and introduced that way and can never leave it alone. Say, thank you. I know that you're meaning to compliment me, but let's take a look at that word. This is the ultimate oxymoron. You're saying I'm an expert in the unknown. Let's think about that for a moment.
I appreciate that you're humble.
Well,
your humility goes a long way.
I know
But
a
I
lot.
can see where they are coming from when they see
Of course.
how long you have studied, how you have written, and your experience with experiencers and witnesses. So I can say I agree. I appreciate your humility, but I do
Well,
think that you are a
no,
better, let's say, a better testament to that than some other people that we've
Own it, Peter.
met.
Own it.
I know a lot more about the subject than a lot of people do.
Yes.
But ultimately, one of the great frustrations in the work and one of the great challenges, and it makes you, I think, sharper in terms of making your points, hopefully in hearing other people's points, which is just as important, is that it's so difficult to refute certain claims that you consider outrageous as it is to prove your points of view that may seem equally outrageous to somebody else. One series of aspects of thoughts like that particularly irk me is every once in a while somebody, and often somebody of major standing, will say, there are 57 different alien races visiting the planet Earth. And I say to myself, fuck you. How can you possibly know that as an empirical fact? I don't care if you are the president of the United States, the head of the NSA, the head of every world government, and 16 different supreme alien leaders rolled into one super intelligent being. You can't know that for a fact. So don't say it, because it makes all of us look like idiots. Or all aliens are good. That's in pretty much the same fuck you category. It's absurd. And part of the problem right now, and it's a real problem, is that we're asking the wrong questions. Good, bad, right, wrong. They could care less about that stuff. They're doing, and they, each group, are doing what they're doing for reasons best known to them. They have their own agenda. They have their own timetable. They have their own priorities. And we kind of make it into a cartoon of, well, you're good or bad, because I didn't have a good time when I interfaced with you, or I had the most beatific, transcendent time imaginable. That doesn't necessarily make them good or bad. It means that you freaked the hell out, as I think I would in a certain kind of situation, or that you were open to and held a point of view that was, somewhat transcendent and positive and good for you. It doesn't mean that we're not being manipulated or lied to. At the same time, it doesn't mean that we're not being told the truth. We have one group of people in the world of UFO studies now who are more and more saying they are good. And we need to find a way to connect with them. And we need to find a way to be accepted and accepting of them before we even have a chance at evolving further and becoming members of the Galactic Federation, or whatever term you want to apply to it. There's real nobility there, and I think there's importance to that point of view
I
because
agree.
it's real.
100%.
However, again, it's one group of people seeing that because that's what they long to see. and because it may very well be real. On the other hand, we have the more traditional, whatever they are, whoever they are, they're different from us. We can't trust them. We've got to be on guard. We have got to be ready to defend ourselves, which means we need bigger bullets and bigger guns that shoot harder and explode bigger, and get ready to take them down, because this is our world. Oh, really? And both points of view are easy to understand, and they're completely human, and they need to be respected. But one doesn't displace the other.
What happens when they find out that maybe we were their creation? What
Well,
if we have been manipulated for
yeah,
thousands of years
yeah,
in order to be more acceptable within their societies, or created more like them
you bring
in
up a
order to be a more spacefaring being?
well, you bring up a very important point. Um, for any of your listeners who are not familiar with Charles Fort, the term Fortean, which covers a great deal of the paranormal and of wonderful factoids that completely explode the disciplines they're located in, whether it's history, science, archaeology, anthropology. Charles Fort was a quiet, scholarly man who spent his adult life in archives and libraries chronicling these facts. He described science, I'm not quoting, but paraphrasing, as a headless, gutless maw that incorporates what can accept and expels what it can't. Um, a great Nobel Prize award-winning physicist Max Planck said, "Science progresses one funeral at a time." I
Whoa.
love that. You know, the way to newer thinking and acceptance is for the old guard to die off, or at least to open their minds to ideas and thoughts that are difficult to deal with, especially if you're schooled in a certain area and that diploma on your wall must be defended at all costs because it's based on, your doctoral that said this. And if you accept that, what good is that anymore? Um, the the fact that we are now in a period of uh, slow organic disclosure, I'll call it, is not because I believe in any way the United States government, for lack of a more descriptive term, wanted it. It's that they lost control of the narrative at a certain point some years ago, partly because of the advent of the internet,
Yeah,
which
they
of course is
they can't keep it quiet anymore.
right. But that is a double-edged sword.
Mhm.
For every important fact on the internet,
They can
there are two
manipulate
pieces
it.
of total crapola
Right.
or film footage that was done, in somebody's computer that,
Total hoax, yeah.
you know, people, it all, for me, a lot of it goes back to the wonderful mantra on the X-Files poster: I want to believe. We all want to believe something or not believe something about this phenomenon. There you go. There you go. And one of the most creative shows in the history of
All-time
entertainment,
favorite.
especially them first 7 seasons. The last three, I think, too much money and a little bit of laziness there. But I love the show personally. And I used to lecture people to a degree when I would be the case that I'm probably first and best known for a lot of people is the British Randallstrom forest case. And I'm very proud of a lot of the research that I did and a lot of the material that appeared in the book that I co-wrote, Left at Eastgate, which was a British bestseller. But several years ago, it all melted down when my then co-author was exposed to be a liar and a sociopath and a forger. And, if you read the book now, you have to read it as kind of a cautionary tale. But I used to use that phrase. And then in this period of kind of coming out of the bomb crater that what I'll laughingly call my career had been left with after that, I had to acknowledge that I had wanted to believe something so much that I missed stuff that I should have caught. Again, I
Mhm.
wasn't the investigative writer or the investigator that I am now, that I was
How
30
long
years
ago
ago.
was that? Was it 30 years ago? It was
Well,
70. I thought it was
80.
was it 80?
1980.
the event happened in Suffolk, England in December of 80. The story
1980,
broke
yeah. Okay.
internationally in October of 83. I became actively working, co-authoring a book in the summer of 87. It came out in 97, and it all melted down 2016, 2017. So definitely well beyond it right now. Again, the reason I bring it up is
So we're getting
because,
ready to come up on the 40th anniversary.
oh yeah, no, it actually, the 40th
80
anniversary
was in
was
2020.
in December. It was in December.
Of 2020.
Oh, 20. Okay.
Yeah.
What year are we in?
Yeah, math is not
It's
my
a blur right now.
strong point right now either. But that will to believe, or that will to want to believe, or to just long for, Carl Jung wrote a book called Flying Saucers. I think a modern myth of things seen in the sky. The subtitle, maybe I'm off by a word. And in it, he talked about all the Jungian stuff that, if you have any familiarity with his brand of psychology, you would imagine a projected longing for a new pantheon of gods to save us, technologically from the destruction we've wreaked on each other. And all
Is
of that.
is that a human construct? We want to have the gods and the rulers.
Well, it's harder to conjure up at this point a biblical fire and brimstone God with a capital G coming down and smoting all the bad guys' asses, although many people do follow that idea and long for that to happen. But in the more modern mind that's leaning into, what are we going to do now? We've made such a mess of things. That Jungian idea, holds water. At the same time, being Carl Jung, he also said, yeah, and they're probably real machines from other places under intelligent control. It's all happening at once on a certain level. What our responsibility is, I think, for starters, to all be better listeners to what other people are saying. And that's something most people don't like. It's, I've got my theory, or I've got my belief, and don't you dare try to shake me from it. Also, America, let's face it, it has always had a strong streak of anti-intellectualism running from before there were colonies. And I understand that too. If you were lucky enough, like I was, to have parents help you go through a couple of years of college or university, as I did, and then studying art there, realizing what I really wanted was an art education, transferring to an art school in New York City, getting a partial scholarship, selling work, working in the school library, a little hope for my folks. I ended up with a BFA.
From
the School of Visual Arts in New York.
Visual Arts in New York. Yeah. That's
Most
amazing,
people,
by the way. I love that.
most people, and I taught there for 13 or 14 years
Yeah,
too.
I saw that. Yeah.
Now, as anybody who is lucky enough to have spent some time in academia in that sense knows, 4 years is the traditional amount of time. 15 years. And that has to do with taking night school course year after year after year in order to get those extra credits.
You know who else graduated from there, Kevin? Sorry, husband. He's my show host, husband.
Number
Hubby
two.
number two. Yeah. Christopher Garetano graduated from there as well. The guy who wrote Montauk Chronicles. Yes.
Well, my point is,
yes. So we've got two esteemed men from there. I love that.
If I wasn't lucky enough to have some financial assistance and some encouragement and an opportunity, and had to go to work right out of high school, if I was lucky enough to finish high school, I think, there's an understandable resentment for people that you feel look down at you. And even if they don't, it's an understandable defensiveness. And that's another thing that gets in Americans' ways of connecting with people from really different backgrounds. Some of the smartest people I've ever met, never got close to a college or university. And some of the biggest jerks and absolutely thickest posts on certain issues are people with PhDs. There's no correlation here. But unfortunately, one thing that has happened, especially over the last half dozen years or so, where the world of conspiracies, which used to be on the fringe of society more than not are now seen as mainstream. And the expression of that is my belief, no matter how unfounded or how outrageous it may sound to you or how impossible it is to prove, my belief is worth all of your studies and the books that you've written and the research that you've done. Well, you know what? That's not true. And yet we live in a climate where I saw this thing on the internet and, oh yeah, no, I don't know who put it there. I didn't see any,
Don't know where it came from, really.
Nope. And the amazing footage, I don't know where it was shot. There's no photo analysis of it, but look at it. It's amazing. Don't tell me that's, not real. Well, it's not real. And so we're chasing our tails a lot and arguing about things that it's a shame that we're spending the time and energy arguing about when there is this larger, amazing reality that we're poised on the edge of, that we may or may not get to see, but that a lot of us thought we'd never get to see what's happening right now. Also, I'll just tag this on, that report, the report that came out of the Pentagon in June. For most of us who are somewhat studied in this area, it was what we thought it would probably be.
Are you talking about the 9 pages that were released, or the
Yes,
17,
the 9 pages.
17 or whatever?
Right.
No,
whatever
no.
that unredacted version was, that are, congressional representatives and key people in the Pentagon and cabinet members and people in the military industrial complex and appropriately need to know people around the world may be more intriguing. I mean, it obviously is. We don't know what it has, but at the same time, what we have seen, as Shakespeare said it best, much ado about nothing. However, make no mistake about it, that's not it. If they can get away with it, the government, the Pentagon, will come out with dozens of more reports for dozens of years if they can possibly stretch it out, which they probably won't be able to. But mark my words, one thing they will never discuss are the more exotic aspects of what those of us who are studied in this or have had things happen to us know are as real as the noses on our faces.
Do you feel like maybe they are going to ever get to the point where they discuss the abductions of humanity?
Well, that was one of those things that I meant, that hybrids, missing
Yeah,
fetuses,
right, and the hybridization program. Yes,
all
absolutely.
that
Are
stuff.
do you think those will be in the following years?
Not unless their hand is called or pushed or forced in a certain way that I can't even imagine. I don't think there will ever willingly be an admission of an awareness of that. And they're as
That would
aware of
be
it
so
as we are.
fucking damning. Really, it would be.
Well, it would be damning mainly because we've been hearing for 70-something years that they don't exist. It's all fake. It's a facade. It's a imagination.
Exactly.
It's so, but the problem is that, I constantly feel that more people are concerned with the craft than the actual contact that they are creating. And there's still such a huge stigma behind visitations with people.
Yep.
People still can't get out and talk about it. So at some point it's going to have to be discussed, and I just can't wait for the day. And it's I don't see it happening within the next 5-10 years. I still feel like we're going to be shunned aside. And I don't know who that first person is that they're going to say, look, this has really happened to her. Is it going to be Betty and Barney Hill? Is that going to be the first one? Is it going to be somebody who has been dissected and put back together? Is it going to be someone who's had implants that are not of this earth? Who are those people going to be that they bring forth and say, look, this has actually happened to these people?
Well,
that Tiffany Mack, those stories that she's told really happened. That's the ultimate.
I don't think that that's where it's going. But
if they can help it
in general, right.
If they can help it, it's going to be nobody. All the more reason that we come back to the subject of experiencers and abductees who are willing to go public with their experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Again, part of what they're going to experience is people saying that didn't happen. I don't believe it.
Mm-hmm,
You just
mm-hmm.
wanted to get on
Lies,
television.
lies, lies. You
Yeah.
just, yeah. And I guarantee you, I have never been offered a cent. I don't know very many people who have been offered more than a few cents. You know, even the people that go on to these shows, I have talked about, you know, how much they've made per episode or per interview. And honestly, it's not excessive.
No.
People are not making
Well,
a
they've
ton of
approached
money
you.
off of this.
So you know
They
for a
did
fact.
approach
It's a
you.
joke.
They're not offering a ton of money. It's just not in the cards for people like us. It's not about that. If you want to come forward and share your story like Travis Walton or whatever and have a movie made, I really don't think it's going to be that great for you.
Well, as history has proven.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, though, that for every person that comes forward who other people that we don't know grew up with, work with, that really happened to you? Yes, and I understand why you never talked about it. You
I
know
have
what?
not had one person in my social group ask me about anything. So I don't know if it's very uncomfortable for other people,
Well, of course it
and it
is.
may still be a little too uncomfortable
Yeah,
for people.
it is. But at the same time, do you have a sense that they're making fun of you behind your back? Probably not.
No, I don't. I mean, I take everything so lightly because if I don't laugh, I'll crack. I will absolutely go bonkers. So I take it, I listen to what's going on inside my body, what's going on inside my head, what's going on in my surroundings, and take it and try to understand, is there a message here? Am I supposed to learn something? Or it happened and just get on with your day. And sometimes that's all you can do is it happened and I got shit to do. I've got kids to raise. I've got, you know,
That's right.
jobs to do. So you have to compartmentalize like you had said earlier. But I don't think that people should think, oh yeah, if I tell my story, I'm going to make a fortune. It's not going to happen, people.
No, of
It's
course.
not going to happen.
The
So
main
you have
thing,
to be willing to be very comfortable in your own skin
yeah,
and be able to take some crap from other people saying you're full of shit. And if they can say that, and for a lot of people, I wouldn't have been able to handle that years ago when it first started happening. I would not have been able to have somebody say you're crazy because it was such a triggering word.
Sure.
And it always will be. That's one of those things that you don't want to say to somebody who's experiencing these situations and visitations. And the more that people say that, the more closed down you are. And so but I think it causes more trauma by shutting down and not sharing. So when we have discussions like this on Universal Secrets or on the Peter Robbins show or, you know, somewhere in space, there's things that we can discuss, and I feel like we are in a safe space. There's not very many people who clock in and say, hey, I'm gonna be in this chat room and I'm just gonna tear this guest apart. Doesn't happen often. I've
Yeah.
only seen a few people be real a-holes.
Yeah.
And I
I'm
mean,
gonna
you
give-
have to allow for it, but
I'm going to
I
give you
haven't-
both a chance now to tear me apart while I take a half-minute break. Go to it.
go take a break.
His bladder gave way before mine.
I know, Kevin, yours is like
I'm close.
this big.
I'm close.
Yeah, I'm 3/4 into my bottle
What
of
is your bottle?
San Pellegrino.
Well, I heard you.
I'm being bougie tonight. How's that?
We you know, our guest Peter Robbins,
Mhm.
a UFO investigative writer, investigator.
Mhm.
I don't feel like we've gone too deep into the UFO rabbit hole tonight.
You know, the conversation has been sort of refreshing, though.
No, it's not a complaint. I'm just
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, but go ahead.
The things that Peter has written about are some amazing tales, cautionary tales also. I don't feel like we all understand how dangerous the subject is. Um, and
How
I
so?
I I
Elaborate.
f I feel that there's just, lately, I felt like there's been a lot more people listening in and, monitoring
Well, at
conversations.
that level. Mhm.
Yes.
Anything
Yes.
exciting happened while I was
We were
gone?
just talking about your legs. Nice.
Thank you.
Well, we're talking about sort of cautionary tales when it comes to ufology, and, I think that you have probably seen it in a larger degree than we have. Let's switch gears. Do you wanna talk about, a little bit about your thoughts on Bud Hopkins and his amazing career in the subjects of regression with experiencers?
Sure. Bud Hopkins was a painter, and that was what he loved doing most from the time he was young. His work hangs in museums around the world and private collections. But in the 1960s, being somebody who spent his summers on Cape Cod, he had a UFO sighting. It was not life changing, but it was memorable. And then, to compress the story, in 1976, he heard an account from a local guy in the neighborhood who owned a liquor store. Big joke, he was a teetotaler. Um, but it was an extraordinary case. And Bud, who had a great intellect and a great curiosity, um, investigated it and then published it in 1976. And then fell into this dual career. His first book, Missing Time, did not come out to 1981, and it was one of the true pioneering books about the abduction phenomenon. Um, Hypnotic regression, um, especially in regard to abduction studies, seems to have taken on more of a lightning rod controversial reputation in recent years. And I think part of the reason for that is that there are so many people who do it or have done it with people who really don't know what they're doing beyond they took a course and tried it out on somebody that alleged they had these experiences. um, I think it's something that needs to be approached very seriously and carefully for whatever reason you're doing it. And Bud learned his craft well, um, and then did something that I know of nobody, certainly in the world of UFOs, who is even remotely involved in regressive hypnosis did. He worked under the supervision of his mentor, a brilliant psychologist named Dr. Aphrodite Clamar. The method that she had mastered was the one that Bud used for 7 years. For 7 years, every case and every session that he did, she reviewed before he went off completely on his own. Now, that is something else. I witnessed quite a number of these regressions over the years. I myself have been regressed 3 times um, because I wanted to know if what I remembered was confirmed on some level in my deeper consciousness. And it
Did
was.
his process more of a person comes in, has a list of complaints or concerns, and then he goes back and sort of checks them and checks those comments off the list and sort of walks them through? Or what was the process that he used that was unique and outstanding for Bud?
Well, the first thing was, in most cases, if somebody felt that they wanted to explore their memories or their partial memories or their anxieties or their feelings regarding this subject, it was, are you really sure you want to do this?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was not, oh, good, another person to do regression with.
Mm.
Because if you're considering it yourself, you need to know that in doing it, first, you may be completely disappointed, nothing will come up, or that you're going to have a wonderful experience or confirm your hopes of something, or that you are going to experience or relive possibly the most traumatic moments of your life.
Yeah.
And have you spoken to your loved ones about this? Do you have, a counselor, or are you a person of faith and spoken, to your minister or rabbi, or are you sure you want to do this?
Hmm.
It would vary. It would vary. One of the things over the years, and it all kind of happened organically, like me, he was not a journalist or trained to write. He was a painter. But being a painter, being trained to be an artist, has its own assets in the world of these studies. Of course, it's great to have a background in psychology or science or a lot of other things that come to mind immediately. But if you have an education in the arts, you tend to come at questions or mysteries, sometimes from a very out of the box direction that might not occur to the next person over. With Bud, as he worked with more and more people, and over the years that I worked as his assistant, and to varying degrees was involved in casework with many, many individuals, certainly several hundred over the years, a list kind of grew of indications that you might have had these experiences. Now,
Would you like to share those?
well, they came to, I don't know, 15 or 20
Oh,
that
okay.
were very pronounced. And at one point, somebody with very base motivations got hold of the list and published it.
Hmm.
Thankfully, not a lot of people saw it, and I don't even know where, if it still exists. But if you think you've had these experiences, it's better not to see this list first. For example, when I was a kid, there was a public service announcement. I must have been a very little kid, probably elementary school. There's the 7 warning signs of cancer, on television instead of a commercial.
Oh, yeah.
A
Okay.
cut that does not
I see where you're
heal,
heading.
a sore throat. Oh my God, I've got this terrible
That is
one.
every single drug ad on TV, though, these days.
Yeah.
It
Anyway,
really is.
some of them are quite logical, and I certainly can give you a few, that you have an unreasonable fear of visiting the dentist and being in this kind of pristine office with people moving around.
Or gynecologist.
I forgot to disconnect the phone. Hold on a second while I get rid of
Okay.
this.
It's the bat phone. Commissioner Gordon, I will go save the day.
So
We're,
that's sort of interesting.
yes.
The phone. Let's see.
I'm actually
Okay.
doing an interview now. What time are you coming by?
Here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hold on.
It's kind of.
How about let's mute his? I just muted his line so that we're not listening to his private conversation.
I've had those calls before. All right.
Kevin, have you ever had any fear of the dentist chair?
No, not the dentist chair.
Would be.
Sorry, we muted your conversation so that you can have some privacy.
I wanted
No.
I wanted
Too
a
late now.
soundbite.
If let's say you drive to work and there is a location and it may be beautiful, some pristine little perfect area from like Disneyland in a park, but you will do anything to circumscribe that piece of property. This is off the top of my head, but this kind of thing, if you're making breakfast and all of a sudden you look down at that frying pan and 2 fried eggs are looking up at you and you get anxious,
Oh.
It's a whole list of possibilities,
Uh-huh.
some of them overt, some of them kind of subtle.
Huh.
And again, if 2, 3, 4 of them are there, who cares? Doesn't matter, especially if, your thoughts or your anxiety is very free floating and not, I remember X, Y, and Z. But if, 13 or 14 of them are things that, yes, that's me, then, there it is. Ultimately, regressive hypnosis was undertaken only if the person really wanted to do it. And I have not watched a lot of other hypnotists work, but Bud would take up to half an hour to make somebody feel as, relaxed as humanly possible.
Mhm.
Um, I underwent hypnosis 3 times in my life, regressive hypnosis. Again, like I mentioned before, because I wanted to know what it was like and whether or not it would answer these questions for me. The first time was with a friend who had taken a class in hypnosis, who knew shit from shingles about UFOs, who wanted to try it out on somebody. And what happened, what you think might happen, happened. Nothing happened. The other one, though, was with this New York City police detective, Pete Mazzola, a highly decorated member of the NYPD and a very fine ufologist who died much too young. But Pete had been singled out by the NYPD in the 1970s to undergo special training in regressive hypnosis for use in criminal investigation. And in fact, deploying it in that spirit, he helped break a number of major cases. But I learned my sister also worked with him, and then with Bud. And I understood, first of all, I waited until I was good and ready.
Mhm.
And I was really curious about it and open to it. And Detective Sergeant Mazzola and Bud both told me that I was a very good subject from their point of view because I went into alpha state very deeply. If you're anxious about what may happen, a good hypnotherapist or hypnotist will give you ways to pull back, to objectify, to not have to suffer, reliving this moment fully, or to come out of it when
Right.
when you need to. And for me, both of these experiences were really quite wondrous. I was 14 again, and I'm not speaking symbolically. I was 14 years old again, and the language that I was using, the way I was perceiving the world around me, the fact that I was wearing what we called then a polo shirt rather than a t-shirt. I
Mhm.
was wearing dungarees and not jeans. I was wearing my Keds and not sneakers, whatever. I smelled the grass. I was there. And although there's a part of you that knows on some level that you're not really there, but you're revisiting it. And I guess if you really wanted to, you could yank yourself out of it. I found it one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. Um, and again, it can be a very valuable tool. People have asked me repeatedly and more in recent years how I feel about it. And there's no generalization. It depends 100% on the practitioner,
Mhm.
their empathy, their sensitivity, their training, obviously their grounding and background in the world of abduction studies. Not like I'm going to put this person under, even though I know this shit isn't real, but let's see what they do. Um, and your willingness to let the process work. If it's somebody, if it's the wrong person, or they're sloppy with their technique, or they're seeing you more like a bug on a board rather than a human being looking for answers that you can assist them with, which is a tremendous responsibility. Uh,
Mhm.
and the humanity aspect that goes with it cannot be understated. So it's not anything you can generalize about. Um, but Bud, I think, conducted over 800 hypnotic regressions. That number sticks in my head because this is all analog, pre-digital, and part of my job was to copy in the data into two old-fashioned ledgers, just, as far as that they were cross-referenced as far as the individual, the dates, what number hypnosis it was, if it wasn't a single one, something about, the content of the session, that kind of thing.
We're getting ready to close out here. It's hitting your 10 o'clock mark, but do you have a general idea of when people found out through their hypnotic regressions? Has it mostly been a lifelong situation, a lifelong abduction scenario, or more one-offs?
The former.
Lifelong.
Yeah. I think it was logical to think in the 70s, when this study was in its infancy, that if you had had the experience of being taken and brought aboard or brought to a location, examined or whatever, the odds were like being hit by lightning. That made sense to me back then. What are the odds? What we now see overwhelmingly statistically, do with it what you will, is that they are interested in following certain bloodlines. And that if it happened to you, the likelihood is that it happened to at least one of your parents, and that it may well happen to one of your children. It's the way it is. It's not comfortable. It's not fun. It's simply the facts in evidence, so to say.
Yeah, that's how it's happened in our family. Yeah. And I feel that, with me coming forward and sharing my stories and sharing my journey with our listeners, I am in high hopes that it will help my children in the future and not hurt them in any way.
Yes.
My intentions are only good and hopeful with my children. I don't want to be ruining their life right now. That's not how this is supposed to go down.
Yep.
So hopefully I am benefiting my children and their growth in the future. And they know that they can ask me any questions, come to me with any concerns, and I'm not going to sit there and say, "You're wrong, go to bed, shut up, you're not having this happen." And I think that they can understand that if somebody is visiting them, that they can come to mom and say, "Hey, something's going on. I'm
They
a
have
little
come to
scared."
you.
They
They
have,
have come
well,
to you.
they have come to me.
Yeah.
They have had these situations.
Right.
But I think that that's my goal and my job in this world is to be an advocate for them and for the types of situations that they are going to encounter.
Yeah, that line of thinking that you just expressed, you and some of our other guests expressed about a month ago, a little longer, in the panel discussion that we had on Meanwhile Here on Earth. And I hope that, number one, it's been great spending this time with you guys, and I'm glad to come back and pick up on this at some point in the
Yeah.
future. And that I hope that some of your listeners and viewers will become mine as well. Meanwhile Here on Earth is on Monday nights, 7 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. And you can watch past shows now that they have this new policy where, unless you are a subscriber, and that would be great, but unless you are a subscriber, you can only see the first half hour of each show, which I understand is
With video.
Yeah. But you can go on YouTube and watch my first 30 odd shows, just Meanwhile Here on Earth, type it in and Bob's your uncle, and up they come.
Can you still access the audio version of your entire show on KGRA still without a membership?
I don't know, and I really don't care, in that you can access it on YouTube and just listen to it instead of
Okay.
watch it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
don't know. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was the original plan. I just don't know if they've
I
actually
know
taken that.
you can continue to listen live as the broadcasts are happening at no cost. That will
Okay.
not change. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
There you go. All right. This is rounding third, heading for home. We've incorporated our behind the secrets with our guests. This is our little rapid fire Q&A. And by the way, we were talking books earlier. You're the reader. I'm not so much. I'm reminded this is another reason why I do not like books. My son, whose birthday, Mason, love him dearly, just on the September 4th, birthday number 24. We had dinner, and he threw at me. He goes, I'm going to have a book I'm going to need for school. You want to take care of that for me for my birthday? I'm like, oh, sure.
You're thinking maybe $10. It's going to be probably
No, I already know that. It was $134.
I knew it.
I said, I'll Venmo you later.
I think that's wonderful. I don't think there's a more important thing that you can do with young people or not so young people than encourage them and us to read. And for every UFO book I read at this point in my life, I read 2 novels or a history or an autobiography. Don't get me wrong, I am a movie maniac, but I love reading. And in collecting certain type of books, first editions, second, 18th editions, it took me even a year or two to realize that the books that I was collecting, 20th century fiction, 95% of them had been made into films. And it's great fun to read the book either before or after. And almost always the book is much cooler. And, the pictures are all happening here.
Oh, I want to tell you before we leave, I bought I found in my great grandmother's library stash. It was an entire basement full of old books, a Don Quixote in Spanish hardback, and it had like I want to say, when was Don Quixote written? 1870,
probably around there.
So it was
before I was born.
It was the first year. It was the first year that it was released in Spanish. Really? And I let my English teacher read it in high school, and it vanished. Wow. I never got it back.
Ouch.
Holy hell.
Yeah, I'm going to hunt her down. I'm going to try to find out where she lives and see if she has it on her bookshelves.
If you know anybody in the intelligence community.
Yeah, we can figure this out.
Take it to the universal level, Tiffany.
And my gosh, do you know how much she owes me from that?
It's probably a very valuable book.
I'm sure it was, and never saw it again. And I'm telling you, I mean, if she had rented that from a library, I don't know how much that bill would be, but I'm going to be right on par with it.
All right. Behind the Secrets, Peter Robbins is our guest. Great fucking show. Well, that's been the tag word for the night, and I'm glad. I'm so glad. All right, Peter, play along. First concert you attended. We don't have a buzzard, but Tiffany, get ready.
I watched Beethoven perform. I actually saw the Supremes perform when they were still the Supremes and not Diana Ross and the Supremes. That's how fucking old I am.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Sounds good.
But you're aging like fine fucking wine, Peter.
I've got bragging rights that nobody else in ufology can even come close to. I have sung "Don't Fear the Reaper" on stage with the Blue Oyster Cult.
What?
Oh, it's a great
song.
Love
that song. Okay. It's fantastic.
All right. Number 2, texting or talking? I mean, it is 2021. Oh, yeah. Though did you get my text today? I did send you a text. Just say. Anyway. Number 3, favorite day of the week?
It varies week by week.
Varies day by day. All right, fair enough. Number 4, favorite city in the world besides the one you live in? World, because you're a world traveler.
Well, I don't live in a city now, and the closest, they call it a city, but Ithaca, New York is, for me, a big town. Right. Is my hometown of New York City. Although I've love London. I've visited there probably 25 times. I love New Delhi. I enjoyed visiting Moscow during the Cold War. But New York City, I think, is my favorite city of all time.
Good answer. Let's see where we at. Number 5. Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world, or be able to talk to animals?
Oh, talk to animals, definitely.
What would be the first question you'd ask an animal? That's a digression, but
Depends on the animal.
all right. Well, there's a lot of animals, so we can't.
What's a camel's favorite day?
I'm going to leave that one alone.
Give it to us, Jimmy. Before let me get you snorting. Number 6, favorite holiday.
Generally speaking, Halloween.
There you go.
Getting close. Number 7, scale of 1 to 10. How good of a driver are you?
Oh, I guess a 9.5. I'm a very good driver.
Good. Yeah. 8, invisibility or super strength?
Invisibility.
Number 9, scale of 1 to 10. How good are you at keeping secrets?
Better than most people.
Okay, I got one for you because this one's my favorite. This one's for my daughter Lily. Do snitches get stitches?
I'll have to get back to you on that, but I've got one for you guys.
Okay.
As you know, most people that serve in the military that see combat are not very keen on speaking about their combat experiences with other people, especially if they're civilians or have not seen combat. I do have one good friend who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and did share some thoughts with me. And he said one thing they used to do on patrol when it was completely quiet and, you know, you're bored stiff, but you could have to be ready to defend your life in a moment, was a game that basically was, if you're going to die and it's going to be the same amount of pain, take the same amount of time, would you rather be eaten alive by one large animal or a whole bunch of small animals?
Oh, that's a good question. One big animal. Could it be a whale where you just get sucked in
Jonah,
and just
like I said,
yeah, that's a
time.
You know, that
It
those
can be,
stories
you
in the
know,
Bible or
100
stories.
mice working on you, or 1,000 beetles, or, you know, one shark.
I'd say one shark real quick.
Whoa.
Even if it's just like chomp, 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 just get it over with.
Chomp, chomp, chomp is not real quick.
Okay.
Well, he said the same amount of pain. I'd just rather have it done quickly.
All right. Getting back to these. If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I love history. If I was properly vaccinated,
Mesopotamia.
Now, it was a time or a time and a place, because, you know, I mean, one without the other is just you're somewhere,
That's true.
but nowhere special.
Our budget is time. So, I mean, I guess that could be any place.
I would like to go back to my hometown, like 200 years ago, maybe visit New York City 200 years ago and
be interesting.
Roam the streets that I thought I knew.
Were they still? Oh, well, yeah.
Some are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Name a Peter Robbins pet peeve. Intolerance, an unwillingness to open your mind to new ideas, an unwillingness to entertain a thought or a subject that you, again, like Stanton Friedman said, don't bother me with the truth. With the facts, I've made up my mind. Yeah, to folks who are just unwilling to let go of or challenge themselves on, you know, their set beliefs.
That's a problem for me sometimes.
There you go. I would concur. Favorite season? I'm saying fall, winters. You know,
I was thinking
not
Lowry's.
Yeah. Well,
football, basketball.
I was thinking food seasonings like Lowry seasonings or
Here in Louisville,
Greek
it's
seasonings.
Danos. You know, are you familiar with Danos, Tiffany?
very good.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Favorite
in
season
some ways,
of your choice. Here you go.
Where I am here right now, spring and autumn are especially, colorful and nice in their own ways. One, everything exploding into color right before everything dies and it gets insanely cold. Or the other one where everything's coming back to life again. That's two answers to the question, though. So you'll have to.
I mean, you are Peter Robbins. You can pretty much fucking tell us what you fucking want to tell us. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Whoa. Years ago, it was rum raisin. I'm not a big ice cream eater, is I guess my issue here. Strawberry, if it's like fresh made with real strawberries, that's really great.
Would it be a gelato or an ice cream with the strawberries?
There you go. Now, after having had the opportunity to visit Italy on 2 occasions, and it was just a word, and some American version of that gelato definitely is for me a much more amazing food.
Do you know what it's called in Greece? Do you remember what it's called in Greece? Pagato. So my favorite is pagato. I don't care what kind. Just give me Greek ice cream. It's just like I like gelato too. And it's usually less fattening than the regular ice cream.
Right.
Now that I'm
health tip of the night.
Eat less, enjoy it more. Okay, hit me with your next one, Kevin.
Cake or pie?
Oh, pie. Again, depending on the kind of pie, but yes, pie overall.
I know. It's a guy thing, Tiffany. Sorry. Giving presents or getting presents?
Very definitely depends on who.
I like this guy.
With some people, yes, giving, not to sound altruistic, is a lot more fun. With others, yeah, give me that thing.
I got a present to send you, Peter.
Okay. Hey now.
Good.
Good.
I have expensive taste, so maybe you better save longer.
So do I. It's okay.
Ask permission or beg forgiveness?
Say them again.
Ask for permission or beg for forgiveness?
Ask for permission.
Do you? All right. I'm a forgiveness guy. All right. What's something based on some of these answers, I can only imagine the answer to this question. What's something you could eat for a week straight?
Well, for almost 8 years, when I was younger, I lived in New York City's Chinatown, and I would eat Chinese food twice a day, sometimes for weeks on end, and that was good. I love Japanese food. I happen to be, thankfully, a good cook, and good Italian food. If it was like one dish, that could be tricky, but also bagels, Nova Scotia, vegetable cream cheese, onions, and capers. Yeah, I can live on salmon to a degree.
Do you care for you just said something that reminded me. What did you say? Crap.
Oh.
My brain frogs are kicking in.
Brain frog?
My brain frogs are kicking in.
All right.
No, I was gonna say sushi. So do you prefer sashimi? Do you like it with rice, without rice? What do you prefer?
I love good sashimi and sushi.
Mm-hmm.
My mom worked for the importer of Nikons in this company and rose in that company to be, at one point, the highest ranking female in the entire Nikon establishment in America or Japan, and was very deeply involved in Japanese culture for a lot of her life.
Wow.
Spoke Japanese to some degree, traveled in Japan, had many Japanese friends. And before Japanese restaurants were a part of American, food culture, she was the person who introduced me and my sisters and my dad to Japanese food. And I loved it. And when I had an opportunity some years ago to give several papers for a Japanese UFO group, and spend time in Tokyo and the surrounding area, I could have just eaten Japanese. Well, I love Japanese cuisine very much. And
Have you been to Nobu in New York City?
yes,
Okay, one of my favorites. Favorite place. Love it. Love it. Delicious. If
I'm
you ever
not
get a
even
chance,
sure
people, go.
I'm not even sure if it's made it through as a
Oh,
business. But I was taken there once. But a good Japanese restaurant with a good chef, take me there. I am there.
Leave it to Peter and Tiffany to do my rapid fire segment. You all go into cruise control with it.
I was going to say it makes it very unrapid. Hit
Very
us with your next shot.
All right, just a few more. What temperature do you like your thermostat at? It's a weird question, but it is a question.
65 is fine with me. 70, right in there.
All right. All right. Based on Tiffany's issue tonight, Peter, toilet paper over or under?
Oh, if you have a cat,
there's my what the fuck.
under. Or else they will.
Whoa. You said under? You wanted you want under.
If it's over, a cat will often just hit it and realize, oh, let's keep doing this until there's nothing left to do.
So you have a cat, so we get it. Okay.
It's under. Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
For practical reason.
All right. This is my last question for you. Where is your happy place?
Ooh, that's a phrase that is interpretable in many different respects, and I'm.
Your face in a book. Where?
You mean a physical location somewhere in the universe, or a philosophical or psychological one, or
all the above? It's your answer, brother.
Okay. I will answer that by saying use your imagination.
Imagination can go wild.
Yeah. There's a before we let you go, there was one. There's actually a couple comments. Well, one question. I want to share this. I saw this. What does Mr. Robbins, and we don't even call him that, but he's Peter S. What will it take for the UFO news to be put on the front page of something like the New York Times? Now, granted,
it already has.
Well,
to a degree.
I was going to say in December 2017.
Yeah,
it was front page.
Mm-hmm.
Leslie Keene, the whole all that. But what's the next big thing, Peter, that will make the front page?
Well, John, good question. And you've asked it of probably the only person you will ever ask who, as part of a research project years ago, downloaded every single article, editorial, photo caption, letter to the editor ever published in the New York Times from 1947 on, and has read them all in order on a number of occasions. That's well over 230 different items. And it has made the front page on quite a number of occasions over the years, although usually in a mocking or condescending way. What will make it happen next? Educated guess, it will either be the next big, undeniable, like the, let's remember that the Tic Tac so-called UFOs that made it to the front page in December 2017 was really, and the investigation going back to 2004, 2002, 6, I forget exactly, that was already old news. But I think the next thing that will bring it to front and center mainstream media, emblemized by the Times, will probably be another undeniable either leak or release of an event that was documented, that individuals and, hardware assessment, radar returns, photographs or footage are available for. I would like to think that it would be, something that they initiate on purpose to, in no uncertain terms, make it much harder for folks to deny. And leave you with one thought. Um, I'm not a big science fiction person. A lot of people assume, oh, you're into UFOs, you must read a lot of science fiction. No, I've read a
Same
lot of
here.
great science fiction and seen some wonderful science fiction films. But I choose kind of carefully, and I'm not just, a fanboy of the stuff. Maybe 25, 30 years ago, at least, there was a really cheesy mini series called V, as in Victor. 4 hours,
The
6
first
hours.
one, they did a remake. The first
And
one was
it was remade a few years ago with more money and even crappier.
the first one was
Basically
actually
it
pretty
was,
good.
I
here
tried to
we are.
watch it and I could not get into it. I just
You remember
It
when
was,
she swallowed
you know,
like the
everybody looked like, 80s,
Yeah.
models and,
mhm.
in all
Mhm.
kinds of spandex with great bodies and great hair.
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
going to hear, like usual, to cure cancer and help us
Mhm.
all get along and kumbaya and take us to their home. But of course, underneath their silicone skin,
Right.
they're reptoids and they eat mice and us and glass and dust and they don't mean us well. And then once you learn that, it degenerated into every World War II resistance movie I've ever seen, but much worse, with like the old Jewish guy being the one who figured it out first. And, then you've got the resistance fighters and then the people, hey, I've got my cushy job with the alien organization now. Anyway, all that aside, it began the opening scenes, one of the best premises of any science fiction book or film I have ever seen or imagined. I put it up there with H.G. Wells, with Jules Verne, with Gene Roddenberry. One morning, everybody in the world wakes up, and over the 60 biggest cities in the world hang mile across, mile up motherships. Game fucking over.
Do you
And
want that in
that's where it
our
begins.
lifetime? Do you want that in our lifetime, Peter?
I
Isn't that's
I
what
not
do.
happened with
necessarily,
that's
not
what happened.
necessarily,
No, I
That's what
do.
happened.
but if it happens, one will think, right, they have given us thousands of years to get used to this idea. Why don't they land? Why don't they make contact with us? Well, they do every day. They just don't do it like that. They do it with Tiffany and my sister and Travis and Deb Jordan Cabell and a zillion other people, and people see them, but the rate of acceptance and openness has been growing over the millennia arithmetically and not geometrically. If they or one group of them ever want to just, hit the table side and watch the glass spill over, that's a way to do it.
Mm.
But again, as a premise for a science fiction what if, I thought it was brilliant. It's just that they couldn't carry it off from there. That's a
Mhm.
hard level to maintain in terms of fiction.
Mhm.
Check this out,
And
Peter. Back in the day, you had Dynasty. Was it Susan Collins? Suzanne Collins? What was her name? In the show Dynasty, right? Is that what I'm thinking? The nighttime drama.
That was a little before me, Kevin.
That's why I
oh
asked
yeah,
Peter. I
no,
didn't
very
say
good. Yeah,
Tiffany.
no, I get it, Andy. Yeah, it was that kind of, where rich people dressed up nicely, and
Exactly.
in their
Yeah.
case, I mean, it was really very 80s.
Yeah.
Hair said a lot, and all the actors were chosen because they just looked ridiculously attractive in that milieu and that time.
I'd
Mhm.
love to see Tiffany. Is her? Oh, never. I don't ask you. I'll ask. Go straight to your mom, Queen Colleen. I need a picture of Tiffany's big hair back in the day. Joan
Never had
Collins.
it.
That's who I was thinking of. Joan Collins.
There you go.
There you go.
I
Very good.
I never had big hair. I
Whatever.
always had straight hair except for one freak accident with the perm that was in the 7th grade. So beyond that, it's always been how it looks now. So
Peter Robbins, 2 hours and 30 minutes of showtime with you. The pleasure, I'll speak for Tiffany. The pleasure was, this is the key word tonight, was fucking ours. You do a very cool show on Monday nights, kgradb.com. Meanwhile, here on Earth, you got, I mean, what's, is there an end game with this show? I mean, what's your continued drive with this show?
Say again.
He's wondering if you're quitting this week and joining us.
Yeah, we're looking for a
on
third
Universal
co-host
Secrets,
on Universal.
or
You've passed the application, the interview tonight, because I would love to talk to him all the time. My God.
Okay, I'm signing off, Kevin.
No, free agent.
3-man band.
I'm a free agent in all the shows that I'm guests on, which I enjoy very much. For right now, I'm going to continue as I am, and in the fact that KGRA is a business and it needs to generate revenue. If you do want to become a regular viewer of my show, again, you have over 60 hours of programming available to you for free at your leisure. Meanwhile, here on Earth on Facebook and I'm sorry, on YouTube. However, if you'd like to start following the show and you want to subscribe, a monthly subscription with a 30% discount comes to a little more than $4.50 a month. And if you want to get that discount, just type in my name, Peter. And that's all I have to say about the world of international finance and my place in it.
Good stuff. Pleasure was ours again.
We loved having you on tonight.
Love conversation. Love you, Peter. Tiffany, take us home tonight.
Well, we had Peter Robbins with us hanging for 2.5 hours. We are really rolling in the time. I mean, having some guests on here that we don't have a limited cutoff with somebody going, I got to get to the next show. It's nice.
Jimmy Church is on at 10.
Jimmy Church is on at 10. We love that. We love that we can share more time with our guests. And thank you for just delivering so much information and your personal knowledge and experiences with us. Thank you so much. Is this halftime exactly?
Yeah. We'll be back.
We would love to have you on again. So next week, join us with the Universal Secrets next Tuesday night, 8 p.m. with another amazing guest. Not sure who it is. I'm sure they're amazing, but yes. Thank you so much, guys. Peter,
give us again so much good conversation here. And, here's the cool thing tonight, Tiffany. I'm digressing a little bit real quick. We didn't shove UFO stuff down. Not that we do. I mean, we are kind of known for the whole UFO thing when it comes to the paranormal, but we went off.
Pride ourselves in conversation.
Yeah, Kevin. I mean, it was great conversation. And Peter, you have a spot here anytime you want. Always.
All right. Love you guys.
All right. Have a good night, people. Take care. This has been Universal Secrets.